How is everything outpacing inflation at the same time? How money works.
Price of everything is outpacing inflation at the same time. We are taught in Economics 101 that we measure inflation by gathering up a basket of goods and services, labeling that the Consumer Price Index, and then tracking the weighted costs of that basket over time. In most months, some things will get more expensive, others will get a little bit cheaper.
Well, we know gas is getting more expensive right now. That's for sure.
But over time, we expect that, on average, the basket as a whole will slowly get more expensive. And by the numbers, that is exactly what has been happening. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics,
So that's how they measure inflation.
since around mid-2023, that measured inflation rate has been around 3% annually.
Look at that spike. 2022. So COVID was before this, right? And so this is exiting COVID, or near the end of COVID, that we have this massive spike in inflation. And like inflation's one of those things that even if it comes back down to your 2%, all that added inflation is still there in everything. Like this massive chunk of inflation is still there. You'd have to go below your target if you wanted to try and to even it out, and there's no way they're going to do that. That chunk of inflation is just going to permanently exist.
Annually, slowly trending downwards to about 2.5% today. But it doesn't really feel like that, does it? If you think about everything you purchase in a given week, you would probably be hard-pressed to identify something that is only 10% more expensive than it was 3 years ago. And no, Arizona iced tea doesn't count. The point is, if this basket of goods is supposed to track average prices, what is there left to bring that average down? Now, you might be thinking about something like this chart here. We looked at it many times before on this channel, because it shows
Let me get a good look at this chart. I want to understand it before he talks about it. Price changes of consumer goods and services. So we've got 2020, 2010, 2000, 2010, 2020. And this is the increase or decrease of specific goods. So new cars have gotten slightly more expensive just recently, or I guess 2020. So I want this to be stretched out further. Hospital services? 200%? College tuition and fees? What is that? Madness. Okay, let's see what he says about it.
looked at it many times before.
Television. Had to get me one of those recently. At least they've come down.
Or on this channel, because it shows that over the last 2.5 decades, essentials like healthcare, housing, and education have outpaced inflation. But the average has been offset by non-essentials like cheaper cell phones, software, and televisions. As trade deals go, it wasn't great. But today, we aren't even getting this stuff down here. Computer hardware has basically become a strategic investment. PlayStations that are now almost 6 years old just got a $150 price hike only 5 months after getting a previous $100 price bump. The average new car is rolling off the lot with a sticker price close to $50,000. Software has primarily become an ongoing and very expensive subscription. Fast food that used to be cheap, quick convenience has turned into a very expensive treat. Your energy bills are competing with multi-billion-dollar data centers. Housing, healthcare, and education has always been so messed up that it's barely even worth mentioning anymore. And beyond all of this, tariff discussions mean that even generic consumer junk is quickly becoming coveted collectibles.
For Pokemon cards.
So is there actually anything left that is quietly offsetting these statistics and bringing that average back in check? Or is this all just another case of lying with statistics? These are some important questions because, well, with oil prices heading the way they are, none of this is likely to get better anytime soon.
energy bills are making everyday life unaffordable.
Food prices will rise another 3% in 2026.
They want $15 for this big arch burger.
No new models under $20,000 remain on the market.
The Rampocalypse continues.
This will probably be
Hasn't RAM come down, I think?
25 grand.
Companies that try to make everything into a subscription on your car.
Well, now it will only be offered through a monthly subscription.
This is an extreme amount of difference.
Okay, so the simple
I've never understood why the high-tech cars don't like the high-tech features of the cell phone. Like, why do they have to build a computer completely with the car? When you have one in your pocket, like I've never understood that. Like, you could say that you get a slightly bigger touch screen. Like, the touch screens in most cars suck. From my personal experience. I don't know, I just think voice commands and setting stuff through your phone, you essentially put your phone on the dash and control the internals of a car that way. It just makes more sense. But I'm sure there's a reason they haven't done it.
answer is no. You're not crazy to be a little bit skeptical about the inflation figures that suggest things are only getting more expensive at low single-digit rates year over year. However, it's probably not because the government is secretly pulling the strings of this process to make the results look better than they really are. If that actually was happening, there are so many people that look at this data every month that they would be quickly called out on it. Never attribute to malice what can adequately be explained by stupidity. And in this case, there are three major problems with how we process this data that is probably giving us the wrong idea about what we pay for, well, everything. The first is that it is incredibly difficult to control for quality in the official inflation rate, but maybe not in the way you might expect. We will get to broad market shitflation or shitification soon enough, but
I mean, and shitification is just the business model, right? You get a product, usually, if you're providing a service or something, you do that under market. You do it in such a way that you lose money. And therefore, the consumer is gaining value. That allows you to get market share. Once you have market share, you shitify in order to get the value and to get the big profit. The issue that they're running in right now with AI, that they're trying to do the same thing, except train an AI model off other AI models. It's very easy, like, cheat and steal somebody else's progress in the AI space, that if you start shitifying, there's going to be a competitor who's like better and doesn't shitify. And so they're having issues with that, with actually making a profit, from my understanding. I gotta change this stream. All right, that should be good.
surprisingly, another difficult blind spot is things getting better. Something like a new iPhone performs the same basic function as the original that was introduced almost 20 years ago now. But the maximum capabilities of the modern offering are hundreds of times greater than what Steve Jobs walked onto stage with all those years ago. To the statisticians crunching the numbers, this presents a problem, because if prices remain more or less the same over the years, then you are technically getting more phone for less money. Similarly, if prices rise but capabilities rise much faster, there is an argument that a consumer can maintain their purchasing power by buying a lower-end phone that will still outperform a high-end product from several years before. Now, the BLS actually lays out their exact methodology on their website for how they deal with these kinds of changes in every single product category they measure. And in plain English, this is exactly what they do. If a phone gets more expensive, but it comes with a higher pixel count, a better processor, or an improved camera, it will be adjusted downwards in price to compensate for the improvement in quality over the previous offering. And this lower price tag is what will be counted in this basket, even though it's not actually what you would pay.
So they're adjusting the prices of items in the consumer price index. Like, you shouldn't be doing that. A phone is still a phone. Even if it has like a better GPU, it's still doing the same thing. Okay.
The same kind of adjustments are done for things like televisions. Something like a 65-inch flat screen has become a consumer norm today, but just 20 years ago, it would have been an extremely high-end commercial appliance. Now, there is nothing inherently unfair about these adjustments, but for a lot of people, it can stretch their budget, even if they aren't really getting any true benefits from these improvements. I personally use my phone to occasionally message my 3 friends and doom scroll the Financial Times. All of this could be done by a 15-year-old phone without many problems, in theory. I know that a lot of you watching probably have a similar use case, meaning we are all paying a higher price tag without offsetting it in performance in any meaningful way. Now, the statistician's response may be to just use an older or lower tier phone, but well, a lot of us would love to, if it were possible. Yeah, we still need to get to that enshittification problem. Either way, this is still a small slice of the pie because even though, in theory, these tech products have been getting cheaper, they still account for a relatively small portion of our spending, and a small share of this weird statistical anomaly as well. And to see that, we need to look at the bigger ticket items. So it's time to learn how money works to find out what's really letting everything outpace inflation at the same time. Most people have no idea how much of their personal information is already out there. Hundreds of data brokers are collecting and selling your data right now, and they don't need your permission to do it. That's why this video is sponsored by Incogni. Your email address, phone number, home address, and more are probably sitting on data broker websites right now, ready for scammers and identity thieves to buy. And it's not your fault. It's mostly because the companies you trusted with your data weren't careful enough with it. Incogni automatically contacts these data brokers on your behalf and demands they remove your information. They handle the back and forth, the follow-ups, and the legal requests so you don't have to. And with their new custom removals feature, they can even go after specific instances of your info being leaked online. Just Google yourself and you might be surprised to find that news sites, fitness apps, or random websites you've never heard of are holding and sharing your personal details. With custom removals, you just submit the link and Incogni's privacy experts will handle the rest. The way I see it, they can't steal your identity if they have no idea who you are. Go to incogni.com/howmoneyworks or use code howmoneyworks at the link below to get 60% off an annual plan and take your personal data back. Okay, so obviously not everything that goes into this basket is counted equally when calculating inflation, because some things just take up a larger share of household.
Like that's wild that they started adjusting prices, like, of the things that are in there based off the quality of the item you're getting. That's going to lead to some problem in what the inflation rate actually is.
Budgets. If the price of movie tickets doubled in a year, that might suck, but it's probably going to have much less of an impact on the average person's budget than something like the price of insurance. Unless you're Michael Bolton, I suppose. Anyway, what that means is that entertainment items like movie tickets are weighted much lower than insurance premiums when calculating the consumer price index and its change over time, i.e. the inflation rate. By that logic, it's probably unsurprising that the biggest category that gets thrown into this basket is housing, but it gets put in there in a really unintuitive way, because of course it does. The problem with housing, both from a societal and statistical perspective, is that it is both an essential consumer good and a speculative asset. But when the BLS is putting together the consumer price index, they want to separate out the speculative asset part of housing and focus on how people are using it just as an essential good to be consumed like food or water. The TLDR from all of this is that house prices aren't measured directly in this basket like the price of a can of beans is. Instead, the BLS surveys homeowners and rental listings to try and establish how much they think they would be able to rent their home for, something they call owner's equivalent rent. The idea is that if you are renting a house, you are making no contributions towards that being your asset, so it is pure consumption of shelter as a good and not an investment. The theory makes sense, but it also means that the biggest purchase that most
like that's a wild change off like the actual price of housing
people will make in their lifetime isn't directly counted by inflation. Now, it is still indirectly counted through this rental equivalent mechanism, but that creates 3 major problems of its own. The first is that rental agreements last for a very long time, which means this data can lag behind the reality of the true housing market by several months. The second is that rent isn't necessarily consistent between properties. Some include utilities, maintenance, and services, while others are extremely basic. The third problem is that for a lot of Americans who do actually own their own home, or at the very least dream of owning one day, it ignores other costs like maintenance, property taxes, HOA fees, improvements, insurance, and most importantly, mortgage interest, which can vary widely depending on when you purchased your house. Now, the BLS does acknowledge this in their reporting methodology, but I mean, nobody is actually reading this stuff. And even if they were, it doesn't make their money go any further at the end of the month when those bills are piling up. It doesn't help with the perceived disconnect between what we are told inflation is and what we actually feel. Now, the final big reason that everything feels like it is getting more expensive faster than inflation is because a lot of goods and services are just getting worse. Now, we have already touched on enshittification, where companies will offer the same product at the same price year to year, but skimp out on build quality, materials, or ingredients to save costs on their end while still being able to say that prices have stayed the same. This has been very well documented and reported on, including by the old team at Micro, so if you are somehow still unfamiliar with this insidious process, I will leave a link to that video in the description. Part of the reason why people can't get away with using old phones that would suit their needs perfectly fine is that repairability is terrible and software updates routinely.
Oh, like this is one of those reasons I'd never use an iPhone. If they can just get an update that bricks them. That has never happened to me on Android.
Routinely render older hardware borderline unusable. The gradual decline in quality across the board of consumer goods has been widely recognized in the numbers, and probably in your own experience as well. But one aspect of this that is slightly direct, albeit just as sinister, is the number of hoops that you need to jump through in order to access reasonable prices now. For everyday purchases like groceries, insurance, and travel services, dynamic pricing has become the norm. This is a process where companies will build a profile on you and your shopping habits and use that to individually set prices for different shoppers to extract the highest possible price out of each individual person.
Is this happening in stores? That's what he's making it. Like, I think this happens in like insurance and stuff like that, but what's it called?
Extract the highest possible direct, albeit just as sinister, is the number of hoops that you need to jump through in order to access reasonable prices now. For everyday purchases like groceries, insurance, and travel services, dynamic pricing has
Dynamic pricing. What can you tell me about dynamic pricing? Where is it being used? Dynamic pricing is a flexible pricing strategy where businesses adjust the prices of products or services in real time or near real time based on changing market conditions. Unlike static or fixed pricing, it responds to factors such as supply and demand, competitor prices, inventory levels, customer behavior, time of day/season, external events. Algorithms often powered by AI and machine learning analyze vast amounts of data to set optimal prices that aim to maximize revenue, fill capacity. How it works. Okay. How that drawbacks. Where dynamic pricing is used. It originated in industries with perishable inventory or capacity constraints. Near empty seats or rooms generate no revenue, but has spread widely, accelerated by e-commerce apps and AI. Breakdown of major sectors and example. E-commerce and retail. Amazon. A pioneer changes prices on millions of items frequently, sometimes 2.5 million times daily. I mean, they have a lot of products, right? Based on demand, competitors, inventory, and behavior, it has reportedly boosted profits significantly in some periods. Walmart, Kroger, and others rolling out electronic shelf labels for real-time in-store adjustment. That is wild to me. Like, you could, as you walk down an aisle, see a different price on an item than the next person that walks down that aisle. And like it keeps track of that until you check out. Ooh, okay, that's scary. Transportation and ride sharing, Uber and Lyft famous for surge pricing. Yeah, their pricing always just right. Fares multiplied during rush hour, bad weather events, or high demand areas to attract more drivers and balance supply. One of the most visible consumer examples. Okay, I guess Uber makes sense. I've seen that one in effect. Airlines, longtime users of yield management. Prices fluctuate based on booking time, seat availability, routes, and Delta has expanded AI-driven elements. That seems like a natural fit. Delivery services and shipping. Oh,
has become the norm. This is a process where companies will build a profile on you and your shopping habits and use that to individually set prices for different shoppers to extract the highest possible price out of each individual person. A busy professional trying to rush to the grocery store on the way home from work will be more likely to pay a higher price for the same basket of goods when compared to a retiree shopping in the middle of the day. This dynamic pricing, despite being hilariously immoral, also makes it almost impossible to accurately assess what the average consumer will be paying for their statistical basket of goods because it will change depending on how rich and lazy an algorithm decides they are at any given point in time. There are similar pricing hurdles to this in other areas as well. If you want to get a decent deal.
I mean, if you start doing things like this, then consumers are going to start using AI to try and find the cheapest product. Like, it's not a one-sided thing.
At McDonald's these days, you need to download their app, check your daily rewards, and navigate different bundle offers to find the best deal that suits you. If you can be bothered to do all of this, then you might end up spending half as much on the same bag of food compared to someone who had the audacity to think that fast food should come cheap and convenient. So yeah, the statistical strain of keeping up with new and very expensive technology that has become increasingly essential, the strange way that we count a housing market that has left a lot of people behind, and good old-fashioned corporate cost-cutting. Combined, these have all helped to make it feel like everything is outpacing inflation at the same time. Now, those are the statistical nuances that you should be aware of when looking at the headline inflation rate. But even with all of that, this is still a weighted average. All of the statistical trickery in the world shouldn't change basic arithmetic, right? So for the sake of completeness, maybe we should look at what categories have actually been falling below the overall inflation rate in the last 12 months, right? Well, there is good news and bad news there. The good news is that one key category that has actually been falling has a very tangible knock-on effect throughout the entire economy. The bad news is that that category is gasoline and other fuels. And I can't imagine that when the latest CPI is calculated next week, fuel prices are going to maintain their downward trend.
So one of the things that has been dragging the inflation numbers down was a decrease in oil prices. And we're about to see the greatest oil shock in what I think like history, right? Like biggest oil shock there's been. And from my understanding of it, oil tankers are extremely slow. So don't when an oil shock hits, you don't feel it right away. It actually takes like more than a month for the shock to spread throughout the globe. And we're about to get there, I think. Where we're gonna see probably a pretty steep increase. And even more than what we've seen so far. And that's going to take the inflation numbers and it spike them. And so, in order to try and stop inflation, the thing they'd have to do is raise interest rate. But I don't see them doing that.
Now, I know that a lot of this sounds highly theoretical, and 15 minutes of analyzing weaknesses in government statistical collection probably isn't the most interesting YouTube video you could be watching right now. But I still really wanted to make it anyway, really because of how important it is to everything else in our financial lives that hangs off this inflation figure. We have asked for our pay raise to keep up with inflation, make sure our savings are earning interest so we don't lose our spending power, and we generally accept some price increases because businesses need to keep up with, well, inflation. But especially for most of you watching who are statistically younger, early career professionals, it is very likely that your true cost of living is rising much faster than this single measurement might suggest. And if you want further proof of that, go and watch this video next to find out how things are not only getting more expensive, but also systemically worse across.
So, I'll post it. Can I do that? That's the chat where I could post the video. I don't think I'm going to be able to do that today. I imagine that needs a full reset to fix. So we'll work on that another die. So basically, I think we are going to see a spike in inflation. Where's that chart he showed initially? Like, I don't think it's going to be bad as it might be as bad as 2022. That huge spike here. That kind of all depends on how long the war goes on for. The shock continues. See something like that again, which is just gonna lower everyone's buying power.